Welcome to another episode of the Hardwood Knocks podcast. This is a live locker room edition. We are going to be getting into, for people who are just entering the room, we're going to be getting into some NBA trade ideas, some who says no, since we have the deadline coming up on March 25th, and then there will be an Ask Me Anything. We already have questions lined up. A bunch came in from Twitter, but if you're in the room and listening and you're rolling with us, we hope you all stay. We're going to answer your questions. You can ask us anything. Basketball, no-show sock, brands that you need recommendations for. We're all game for it. But first, Adam, my fantabulous co-host, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm just hoping we have fewer technical difficulties this time around, since we were struggling to figure out the locker room app on our first live episode last week. But now there's just a new source of havoc, since I have over a foot of snow in my backyard right now and the power is flickering, and you could be on your own before too long here.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that, because I would feel terrible for our listeners. But look, I came up with a few NBA trade ideas, many of which were focused on the Rockets because they seem like they are the only team that's like very much selling at the moment. So can I throw them at you and see what you think before we get into our Ask Me Anything?
Absolutely, though. I do want to follow up on the only team that feels like it's going to be selling. Do you expect it to stay that way, or do we think that like the Thunder are going to enter that mix with like George Hill and Trevor Ariza, who hasn't yet played this season, or anyone else?
So the Thunder are already definitely selling, but the problem with them is like beyond George Hill, who hasn't played after having right thumb surgery. I think it was right thumb surgery. I don't know who wants Trevor Ariza at $12.8 million when he hasn't played this year, unless you're taking back a bad deal, which I'm sure they're also willing to do. At the same time, they just don't have, like, the Rockets just have a bunch of players to sell that are interesting, which is also weird to say, because if these players are so good, why do the Rockets absolutely suck?
Right, and it's just,
they've been injured, but
it feels like such a weird deadline in general, too, both because we have 10 teams who are going to be competing for those play-in spots, and just even those teams at the bottom of the standings, it's hard to actually pinpoint explicit sellers, because it's like the Kings don't really want to. The Timberwolves are doing the opposite. Like we heard the rumors the other day that they were interested in adding John Collins. The Pistons don't really have anyone of interest left. The Wizards are more competitive now. The Cavs are more competitive now. The Magic are never going to sell because they're the Magic. So yeah, I mean, like it does feel like it's only the Rockets right now.
I'm just, and they're going to be the team that just makes a ton of moves. Like that's also the team that you look at because they have so many different pieces, and the contenders are going to be the one that are like sort of vulturing on them and trying to pick up those players. So the first one to throw to you involves the Nets and the Rockets. I have the Nets getting Daniel House and PJ Tucker. The Rockets receive Spencer Dinwiddie, and the play there is he will opt out and he will own his bird rights. Now, before that, you could try and reroute him to another team, but they also get a 2021 second-round pick, which comes via Atlanta, which, you know, surprise, surprise, could be mid 30s, low 40s at this point, and then a 2025 second-round pick from Golden State.
It seems realistic to me. I can see why the Nets would want both House and Tucker. I can definitely see why the Rockets would be intrigued by acquiring Dinwiddie's bird rights, even if he's not going to make an impact this season, which kind of goes without saying. I don't want it to happen, though. Like I feel like the Nets should just lean so fully into this offense first model because it's going to work. Like we've seen how quickly James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant have managed to coalesce around one another on the few opportunities they've even been on the court together to this point. And like, yeah, Tucker kind of fills that void as the small ball five who can guard every position on the floor, even if his three-point shot is no longer as reliable at this stage of his career. But I don't know that I want it to happen, because I'd rather just see them just lean all the way into this offense over everything mindset.
You are currently sharing that mindset with someone who was in the Bleacher Report comment section, said he would rather them lean into offense and trade for Wayne Ellington, who would play more than PJ Tucker. And I think PJ Tucker brings just so much more of what they need. And even if Kevin Durant's not going to be healthy, I just don't know why you would focus on offense if you're Brooklyn at this point.
I mean, yeah, I don't know that they can really go wrong if Dinwiddie is being used as the trade piece, because ultimately, like, they're probably not going to re-sign him this offseason, I would think, if he's not traded, just because there's so much money allocated toward the big three. And you don't need that like redundant luxury piece. As good as Dinwiddie is, that's what he will be on this team. So like whether they're acquiring more offensive firepower or a defensive versatile wing / forward / small ball big man like Tucker, like I don't know that there's a bad decision if they do want to move Dinwiddie.
It's tough because Dinwiddie is so good that the idea of getting a 35-year-old PJ Tucker and then Daniel House, who does have a year left on his deal and can guard bigger wings, is not necessarily ideal. But at the same time, he's injured, and I don't know. You can't pay him. Would be my,
No, you can't. But yeah, so that's why it's like I think from Brooklyn's perspective, I'm probably just going to say yes, like regardless of what they're getting back for Dinwiddie, just given the situation. But I think like. I don't know that I would prefer Ellington to Tucker for this team, but I like the idea of just leaning even more into the offensive exploits.
I definitely disagree, but yeah. Let's get to the next one. So this one involves the Nuggets. I have them getting Aaron Gordon from the Magic for Will Barton, PJ Dozier, and a 2023 second-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in if the stock on Gordon has fallen to that extent. Like you still get this super exciting high upside, do all sorts of things, just none of them extremely well forward and Aaron Gordon. And I would love to see like the 2-man big game with him and Jokic together. Like that still sounds so fun.
Well, two things. Is it really that low? Because Will Barton has not been as prolific as he was last season, but he can still generate his own offense, help table set for others. And I guess I would view him as a value, not a value, but good value if he picks up it's like a $14.7 million player option where he gets less valuable to the Magic. Because look, the Magic need that guy I just described. They need as many of those guys as they can get right now. And I actually wasn't trying to undervalue Gordon here, even though he's been dealing with that sprained ankle for, I think, since the beginning of February, basically. They need a guy like Barton. If they don't want to re-sign him, then it becomes a matter of, yes, Dozier is good, shooting like 38, 39% from three this year, and he's taking on some really good defensive responsibilities. My question is, let's say Barton is going to opt out. The Magic realize that, and they say, we want your 2021 first instead of the 2023 second. If you're Denver, are you still doing this?
I don't think so, for the exact reason that Jeremy Brenner, and I apologize if I am mispronouncing that, just said in our discussion on the Locker Room app, which is that Gordon might be too injury prone for a contender to take that kind of risk. Like at the price of a second round pick and Will Barton and PJ Dozier, I think that's a risk I'm willing to take just because the fit does look so good on both ends of the floor. But if we're talking about a first round pick, then that might be where I draw the line and start looking at other targets who I know that I can count on a little bit more. Like ultimately the floor is going to be a little low for Gordon.
I kind of agree. If you can still work it where maybe you're keeping Dozier and then you're giving up your first round pick instead, if the Magic don't want him, which I think they should absolutely want him. And I agree with Jeremy's sentiments too, that he might be a little injury prone. Also, some of the questions that I received on Twitter was, how does that work? Because you have Millsap and JaMychal Green and then Jokic. I think Gordon is not a 3 to me, but in Denver he could be. And there's also Michael Porter Jr. there. Those two could be interchangeable, but if Gordon's playing off the ball, he can be a 3 because it doesn't matter what he's doing off the ball. And we know he can defend 3 through 5, I would say. Definitely 3 and 4. And no, he's not a lockdown defender when you're looking at one-on-one situations, but I do think he helps. And I think it also allows you to downsize further in those non-Jokic minutes where, I don't know if you want Millsap and Green or Green as the only big. I don't know if you want them as the 2 bigs. But with Gordon there, things get interesting. And so, look, and Denver's defense has been hot lately, by the way. They're top 7 in defense over their past 14 games. Opponents aren't shooting well from 3, sub 33%, so that's going to normalize. I like the Gordon pickup for them. He has a year left on his deal, too, and is still relatively young. So the fact that he kind of aligns with the Jokic-Murray timeline, too, I actually would, if Orlando came back and said, we want the first and Dozier, I actually might consider it. Especially if Will Barton's going to opt out. Now, I think
it's like right on the cusp of that. Yeah, I think my only outstanding concern there would just be the fit within Denver's defensive system. Just because Mike Malone never has that defense gamble too much, it tends to be a try to stay between your man and the basket, instead of like selling out for those steals and transition opportunities, which isn't always how Gordon has liked to play on the defensive end. So it might not be like a super ideal fit, but the value could still supersede that.
I'm going to respond to Jeremy to see, or if he's listening, Jeremy says the Rockets might outbid the Nuggets if that's the offer. Intriguing. If you want to drop in the chat what you think the Rockets offer would be that would beat it, I would be fascinated to know. I didn't consider Houston acting as like a quasi buyer here, but I'll move on to the next one really quick. Let's alternate. Let's go back to a Rockets trade. This one is going to break people's brains because it's such a blockbuster. The Clippers receive Sterling Brown. The Rockets receive Fiondu Kabengele, and a 2023 second-round pick comes via Portland. Now, the justification here is Sterling Brown has been really good this year. He is shooting, I think he's at 39.7% from three. But the bigger thing here for me is that the Clippers need someone who's not Patrick Beverley to kind of check point guards, and Sterling Brown can do that. And he's also run a little point guard. He's not getting the playmaking that the Clippers might necessarily want, but they're saving like $1 million here or something like that, which gives them more wiggle room under the hard cap to use on the buyout market. And if you're Houston, you're getting a second round pick for signing a player that you're not going to keep, who you picked up for free, essentially in free agency. So this was, when I looked at the comment section of where I published this trade, people were kind of making fun of it, but I actually really like it as sort of a, look, the Clippers are hard cap. They don't have a ton of assets. And I think this really, at least it improves their depth for sure. And I think gives them options at how they're defending point guards, which has been a problem for them this season.
I like it if for no other reason than giving Fiondu Kabengele a chance to actually play. It's like he was a first round pick back in the 20.
I'm sorry, we never see first round guys have their third year team option declined when they're that cheap.
Right. But I mean, this guy was a first round pick in 2019. He has like 3-and-D upside as a 6'9" big man. Like he is a very intriguing mold in today's NBA, but he played 5.3 minutes per game and 12 appearances as a rookie and has played 86 total minutes this season. And I like it if for no other reason than getting him some sort of opportunity to play minutes for an NBA team. I do think that you can get more for Sterling Brown given how he's playing right now. But
that's what Jeremy pointed out. And the Clippers do have 3 Detroit Pistons second rounders in 2024, 2025, and 2026. And if I was Houston, I would I think I would accept 2024 because are the Pistons, I mean, you could go deeper and expect the Pistons to be bad, but take the closest one and there's a chance the Pistons aren't good. And that's like mid 30s. I think for Sterling Brown, I don't know that you're going to get better than that.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there.
Sterling Brown for Troy Brown. That'd be interesting. That's from Jeremy Brenner as well. The Wizards could use someone like Sterling Brown too, or basically anyone who plays consistent defense for them. I'm going to try and alternate here. Non-Rockets trade because I have so many. Lakers receive Garrett Temple. Bulls receive Wes Matthews, Alfonso McKinney, and 2 second-round picks, 2023 and 2024.
Yeah, I'm good with that one as well. I like the idea of Temple in LA. I feel like his season has flown a little bit under the radar just because he's playing for the Bulls, but he's been a pretty steady option. And ultimately, like the more depth the Lakers can acquire, the better for them.
Yeah, Wes Matthews has been bad for them, by the way, too. 27.8% from three since January 15th. And if you're Chicago, they just moved veterans into the starting lineup. So I don't know that they should sell. I'm not saying they need to trade Zach LaVine, but Thaddeus Young, Garrett Temple, I'm going to look at Larry Markkinen trades if I'm them. See what you can get because this isn't the season, is my point. And Garrett Temple especially, you don't have bird rights on him. You don't really need them at his $4.7 million salary. Still, maybe you keep Wes Matthews, who's not going to give you the same positional optionality on defense or the same ball handling on offense. But if you want to plug him into your lineup, you can take Temple's minutes, or you can maybe try and move him for another second-round pick. Because I do think a team like Boston just needs wing depth in general beyond Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
Right. Yeah, it does feel like Chicago should sell all the pieces. I just don't know if it's going to happen, which is such a weird situation because you would think that Arturas Karnisovas would want to move forward into getting toward his guys rather than these holdovers from the previous regime. But it does feel like as obvious as it seems a Thaddeus Young trade should be in particular, that I don't know if it's going to happen. It's so easy. It's so easy for these lower tier teams this season to convince themselves that they're still in the playoff picture because of that play-in situation.
I'm going to go to a chat question because it's related to this. Jack Kennedy asked, any potential Warriors trades at the trade deadline? With them, and I'll be the first one to answer it, this is very much, to me, I don't want to say all or nothing, but unless they can get a Bradley Beal or a Karl Anthony Towns, which they can't, I want to make that clear, or maybe a Zach LaVine, and I don't even think they would do it for Zach LaVine, they're just not going to move. They don't have, you can use Kelly Oubre Jr., but Kelly Oubre Jr. and what to get who improves your team? I think you're looking at James Wiseman, you're looking at that Minnesota pick, top 3 protected this year, and they currently have the worst record in the league, I believe. I think they're still behind the Pistons in that regard. I don't know that they have a medium-sized move in them. And so I don't know that I think they should go all in. If they could get Zach LaVine, if they could get Bradley Beal, I'm throwing Minnesota's pick on the table. If it's Bradley Beal, I'm not going to blink twice about giving up James Wiseman as well. But my gut says they're not going to do anything. And I think part of it is because they overestimate their own ability to get production or develop guys. And they missed on a lot of late first round picks are hard. All first round picks are hard. But while they were really good, they weren't really hitting on these, the Jordan Pooles of the world.
Yep.
And now they're in this weird position where the offense is just absolute. It's terrible when Steph's off the floor. Their shot selection with Stephen Curry off the court would make people from 1993 blush. It's bad.
I agree with you on the star level trades, unless it's Beal or LaVine or someone who we just haven't even heard floated at this point, who surprisingly becomes available just before the deadline. I don't think that there's a move out there that's going to involve the Minnesota pick and or James Wiseman. I do still think we're going to see some sort of periphery move, just dealing a second round pick for a fringe rotation guy who can give Steve Kerr someone new to work with, who can inject a little bit of fresh air into the rotation. I don't think it's going to be like this playoff altering acquisition or anything. And I don't really know even what kind of move it's going to be, but just given the way Steve Kerr has talked about the need for help, given the way that Steph in particular has reacted to his teammates' shortcomings lately, I think that we're going to see something. I would be pretty surprised if there's no move whatsoever by the deadline. But because there's no blockbuster just teed up and waiting for them, I don't think it's going to be a mid-level move either, because that wouldn't make sense.
Today, of all days, as we're recording this, Stephen Curry turns 33, underscores how I think they're blowing it. And look, they won 3 titles with him, I get it, but you have a top 5 player still in his prime, and you decided at least to, poorly build the supporting cast around him. And I know they didn't have a ton of options, and I thought the Wanamaker pickup was actually good. But, the Oubre thing was always questionable because it's let's just surround, you already have Wiggins and Dre. Let's surround them with more sub-average shooters. Never made sense to me. And Oubre's played pretty well since his atrocious beginning. I'm with you in every sense, I guess, except for the fact that I'm not convinced that they'll make a move at the deadline because I don't know what it is. But I'll close on this. Anyone who can handle the ball or at least run the offense for a little bit without Steph would be huge. Can you guess where their offensive rating ranks when Steph is on the bench?
Oh, terribly. It's going to be 3rd percentile.
0th percentile. And I'm not even sure if the 0th percentile is a thing, but that's how it's listed on Cleaning the Glass.
I do think Jeremy's question is intriguing, though. If Clay was there, where would they be in the standings? So I assume that we're just inserting him into the mix with the current rotation. So the Warriors are already 19-19 at the time we're recording this, which puts them in a tie with the Memphis Grizzlies, who have admittedly played 4 fewer games, for 9th place in the Western Conference. I think with a healthy Clay, even if it's post Achilles injury, post ACL injury, that we're still looking at a top 4 team in the West, probably. I feel like he makes that much of a difference, just the spacing that creates so much easier paths to the basket for Wiggins, that creates more space on the interior for Wiseman, that takes more defensive pressure away from Steph. And the stat that Dan just mentioned with the 0th percentile when Steph is off the floor, that doesn't happen because you can at least mitigate that decline somewhat by having Clay and his gravity still on the floor. I think his presence can easily be worth 5+ wins at this stage of the season already.
I'd probably agree with you, and maybe you're incentivized to play Draymond a little bit more without Steph because you have more spacing around him, because right now they just mirror those 2 minutes together, which is fine because you want to maximize the minutes that you're playing with your stars. I would probably say, look, I think they're going to be 8, 9, or 10 in the West would be my guess. They're going to be in the play-in. I don't know that Clay gets them out of that territory. Like, I still think they'd be 7, 8, 9, 10 with him. Maybe they're just more likely to be 7 than they are 10. This one was interesting, and I ran it by Suns people, FYI. Phoenix Suns, PJ Tucker for Javon Carter, Etuan Moore, and a 2023 second-round pick. And the one thing I'll say that I think the Rockets would haggle over is why not Abdel Nader? He's playing too well, and I think Houston has lost all sort of leverage with PJ Tucker because he's not with the team anymore. He also has not played well. And so in this scenario, you're getting Javon Carter, who is not playing for the Suns, but he's a defensive bulldog. You play him and Jason Tate at the same time. You even play him next to John Wall if you want to, too, with those three. You might be able to do some real things defensively. I believe if he plays more, his three-point shot will round into form because he was lights out last year, even before he went to the bubble. And I don't know if Etuan Moore helps you, but you're just not, Nader would be good. And if you could get him, if it's Javon Carter and Nader, I don't know if you would need to include a second round pick, but the 2023 second is interesting if you're Houston because that's the first year that Chris Paul won't be on this contract. Is he still in Phoenix? Maybe, but he might not be. And do you have confidence in the Suns to rebuild in the absence of Chris Paul to sort of retool on the fly there? I would take this deal if I was Houston. I actually like it a little bit better for them than I do for Phoenix. But for Phoenix's rationale, Dario Saric at the 5 lineups are destroying opponents at both ends. And Dario is defending really well. He's closed some games at the 5 because Ayton's been so inconsistent. I'm a big DeAndre Ayton fan. But if you have to deal with his inconsistency, and now you're at a point where you might want to close games with Dario, I don't know if that works against every team. A Lakers team with Anthony Davis, a Jazz team with Rudy Gobert, Nuggets with Jokic for sure. And PJ Tucker, I don't know that he's a much better match for Gobert, or he's definitely a better match for Davis than Dario Saric. I don't know, when you get into the Goberts and Jokic, I still think he's going to be better than Saric in those scenarios. And so now you've allowed yourself to sort of diversify your closing unit options. So that's where I was coming from with this.
All I really have to add there, because I can hear you again, is as soon as you mentioned that trade idea, my head just started thinking about a potential lineup with Javon Carter, Chris Paul, Mikal Bridges, PJ Tucker, and Dario Saric. And I don't know how you score on that. That would be so much fun and so rangy and so switchable, and I want to see it now.
Yeah, the Suns are good. I will still make the case that I think they're the biggest threat to the LA teams in the West. And maybe people don't even think the Clippers belong in that conversation at this point themselves. I'm just fascinated by it. And Jeremy Brenner says he proposed that exact trade on Dream Shake on SB Nation. Jeremy, I can promise you that I did not steal it because I did propose it in an earlier variation where they were getting Abdel Nader. But that is, I guess, great minds, like-minded. But I think that that's an interesting one for both teams to consider. A non-Rockets trade now is what we're due for. This one is, so Joel Embiid, and we have a question about him later, and we're wrapping up here on the trades. Out for at least 2 weeks. It's probably going to be closer to a month because he's going to be reevaluated in two weeks with a bone bruise in his left knee. And I don't think, the Sixers have Dwight Howard. They have Tony Bradley. They have Mike Scott. I think that they could they need another big, and if he can shoot, they've already been linked to Nemanja Bjelica, and no, I'm not talking about 2018 when he signed with them only to renege and then sign with the Kings of all teams. But Shams Charania said they have been interested in him this year, and he's not shooting well in Sacramento, but he's a career 39% shooter since entering the NBA. I think in Philly he'll get better shots, more consistent playing time. The trade here was Philly gets Nemanja Bjelica for Terrence Ferguson, Vincent Poirier, and a 2023 second-round pick. It's the more favorable between Atlanta, Brooklyn, Charlotte, and Philadelphia.
I'm going to let you continue to justify this because I'm only hearing every other word.
It's fine by me. So, look, if you're the Kings, you're not getting anything of real value for Bjelica, at least in my opinion, and I don't run an NBA team, so we'll have to see how that goes. That being said, that second, even if they top 32 protected or something, Atlanta, Charlotte, are those teams that you think are going to be good in 2023? Maybe Atlanta, but Charlotte, yes, they have LaMelo Ball. And look, there's also Brooklyn here. I would short their futures. I'm not saying they will be bad, but one of those three teams could be sending you a second-round pick in the 30s. And if it's for a player that you're not really playing now, you don't really need, he's not going to be with you after next season. And the other thing is you don't need Poirier, but Terrence Ferguson, you don't really have wings. You waived Glenn Robinson. He's worth stab in the dark minutes to me. He was a first-round pick for a reason. An athletic dude who really can't shoot. But the Kings, if I were them, you could at least try them out. And if Adam is still – Jeremy Brenner says Daryl Morey and Monty McNair have the rapport to make a trade like that happen for Bielitsa. I definitely agree there. Logan Alton says, was it Belly that almost signed with Philly and pulled out the last second? Was that a bridge burner? It was Belly that did that. And then he signed with the Kings of all teams, I might point out. So I feel like he's been punished enough because he's been on the Kings for the last 2+ seasons. But I mentioned this earlier, Logan, maybe you didn't hear it. Philly has reportedly been interested in him this season, and it's a different front office regime because Daryl Morey's running it. So I don't think that they're going to hold a grudge. But if they are, I mean, look, he left Philly for the Kings. Like, maybe that's unforgivable, and that unforgivability, if you will, is ingrained into the organization or something. I have 2 more trades to throw out here while we're waiting for Adam to get back up and running. Oh, he is back up and running. So what did you think of my blockbuster Bielitsa deal?
What little I heard of it sounded great.
All right, we're just gonna.
How's that for a fence-sitting answer? Because I had no idea what the details were.
So this trade is for the nerds out there, and it is the Milwaukee Bucks receive Austin Rivers from the New York Knicks in exchange for DJ Wilson and a 2023 second round pick. The rationale here, and this is not sexy, but the Bucks are saving a little over $1 million. That'll give them more wiggle room under the hard cap to use in the buyout market because they're sub $1 million under the hard cap when you factor in Drew Holiday's his incentives, which are like close to $4 million this year. But if you're the Bucks and you're also cheap, you could, if Drew Holiday's incentives don't hit, you're very close then deducting the tax entirely after making this deal. That's something you can consider. Beyond that, however, I think Rivers actually helps the Bucks. He's fallen completely on the Knicks rotation, but he was knocking down 42.6% of his threes through his first 13 games. And he gives you someone with better size than DJ Augustine or Bryn Forbes who can create off the dribble. And we also saw Houston get away defensively using him on some bigger guards and wings. Rolling the dice on him too, it's not just zero risk for me, it's also high reward because he has 2 fully non-guaranteed years after this. 2 years, I think $6.7 million or $6.5 million actually. You can, if it works out, now you have a cheap player that's helping you. If it doesn't, you can say goodbye. No cost, no foul there. And the other thing is, this would be a question for you, Adam. If you have Austin Rivers and just knowing I know what DJ Augustine can in theory do on the ball, but knowing how poorly he shot, does it at all embolden you to maybe look at Augustine plus seconds to try and get PJ Tucker then on the Bucks, who would be a fantastic fit?
It does. I think that he would be a good fit, but I like this deal, the one that you originally proposed here, just because the self-creating ability that Rivers brings is important. Even if it hasn't been enough for him to stay in Tom Thibodeau's rotation in New York, like he can create shots off the bounce, whether he's attacking the rim, whether he's taking 3-pointers. They don't always go in, of course, but in the playoffs, we've seen each last 2 years how Milwaukee's offense has stalled. And I think that the ability to have that extra ball handler, especially in lineups where you have to have both Giannis and Chris Middleton off the floor, does matter.
Yeah, and look, I don't think he's going to be the difference between them winning a title or not. But if you can save salary and get, I don't know. I honestly don't even know why Austin Rivers is in the Knicks rotation. He was playing so bad, but at the same time, it's like they have Rose, they have MVP Frank Ntilikina, so I kind of get it. But I'm surprised that
that's starter Ntilikina now.
Yeah, well, at least for a game there. The last trade here, and this is just another barn burner of a trade. It's really not, but it actually might be my favorite one, and it's our final Rockets trade. So congratulations, we've made it. The Jazz receive Danuel House, and then the Rockets receive Udoka Azubuike and Elijah Hughes. And just for anyone who doesn't know, Azubuike was the number 27 pick in the 2020 draft, and Elijah Hughes, a rangy wing, was number 39. The Jazz can include a second, but if you're getting someone who was a first-round pick to maybe give some center minutes to in Houston, I don't know that you would necessarily need it. And Elijah Hughes is even interesting because he's on a really cheap salary for next year, but you can throw a second-round pick in this to give up Danuel House. I don't know if Houston wants to move Danuel House just because his value's probably never been lower. He is dealing with a knee injury at the moment, not shot well from three. He'll shoot better from three in the Jazz system because everyone shoots better from three in the Jazz offensive system. But this seems like I know they signed Ersan Ilyasova, but they like a house type defender is what they need. We've seen him guard some fives, but a lot of fours and threes in Houston over the past couple of years. And look, the season's not taking place in the bubble. So he's probably going to help your team instead of hurting it.
Yeah, I'll take it from the opposite perspective here. And I feel similar to this one as I did about the Kabengele trade you proposed, where I would like to see Azubuike get a chance in a rotation with a team that's really going to play him, which Houston would be in a position to do. I still don't think that the Jazz were just blowing smoke when they said how high they had Azubuike on their board. I wish I remembered the exact number coming out of the 2020 draft, but I feel like it was something like they had him like top 5 on their board or something. And like in a lot of ways,
did they know they were picking right?
So late. Right. Maybe. And they never really specified that. But I do think like the idea that he could be like a Rudy Gobert simulacrum, just another rangy guy who's good at protecting the basket, who's good at showing and recovering when he's defending the pick and roll. Like he can be a legitimate difference maker on the defensive end at the 5. And just giving him the opportunity to do that makes sense.
And the Jazz don't need him because they signed Derek Favors and they extended Rudy Gobert. The other thing I'll say, the move would be if the Jazz want to do something, I don't know what it is, but you move Derek Favors because he's playing like 17 minutes a game, and do you downsize or something like that if you want it. But I think what they need is like inferior guy like House. If Jazz don't need who? Azubuike, that was Quay Wavy. So let's get into if anyone actually wants to speak and Adam is managing it, we'll allot 30 seconds worth of questions or statements that we'll respond to, but we also have a bunch of pent up questions we'll answer as well that I'll go through. So if you have questions, want to speak, please do that now. Ping and we'll get to you. I will say Logan Alton in the chat said, would Utah be able to keep one of the rooks and swap George Niang in? I think they would want to keep him because right now he might be one of the guys that has to go up if they don't make changes. It's going to be him or O'Neal or I guess Ingles. They might even throw Oni in there. Like those are and Yang. George Niang. Sorry, I always mispronounce his name. Those are going to be the guys that they use against the bigger wings right now. And if I was Houston actually, and I could get Azubuike and Niang, I might prefer that, even though Niang's about to be a free agent.
Niang has played pretty well lately too. I feel like they're just consistently winning the minutes that he's on the court, no matter who he's playing with lately. Just the defensive activity, the ability to move the ball. He's knocking down his threes. Like I've been pretty impressed with how he's been performing lately.
We have a question from the chat. So why don't we go from that? Quay Wavy, I hope I'm not mispronouncing it, as a Q Wavy. You could let me know in the chat. Who do you guys have winning MVP now that Embiid most likely won't get it due to missing many games? I will combine that with the other Embiid question that we had, which came from longtime listener Miroslav Shuk. Does Joel Embiid's injury stop his MVP candidacy? I will let you answer, but I will say 2 weeks is going to be about 8 games, and that's when he's reevaluated. He's already 79th in the league in total minutes played, where Jokic is number 2, and LeBron, age 36, year 18, coming off the shortest sports off season in history, is 10th. So what do you think?
I do think that it's going to make it awfully difficult for Embiid to win. This was not just purely from a narrative perspective. This is not great timing for him to miss a minimum of 2 weeks, just because the focus is shifting to that MVP conversation. I feel like on Twitter, we're seeing daily debates about it, whether LeBron has ascended to the top, the Jokic versus Embiid debate, et cetera, et cetera. So missing 2 weeks right now, I don't think it's an absolute death knell for his MVP candidacy if he comes back and the Sixers absolutely take off and he continues playing like he was prior to the injury. It is going to be a significant hurdle. The only thing I'm really certain of in the MVP race right now is that no one should be certain. Like Jokic, I think should be the front runner right now if you're okay with an MVP coming from a 6th seed in the West, which is what the Nuggets are right now. Everyone has differing opinions on that. And without a preordained, defined set of criteria for MVP candidacy, there's no way to say that definitively. Like, if you want to put LeBron up there for the work that he's doing in this age 36, 18th season in the NBA, like, by all means, I don't think that he would be at the top of mind right now, given how much the Lakers have struggled to remain on that same level without Anthony Davis in the lineup. If you're moving James Harden back up, given how well he's played with the Nets,
I'm sorry. No, you can't short circuit a team season for like 9 games.
I'm with you. This is not my personal ballot. I'm just laying out the options here. I think that Giannis should be gaining a little bit of momentum right now. He's arguably playing better right now than he did at any point last season. The Bucks are climbing towards that number 1 seed in the East. It might be easier for them to get it now that Embiid is out for 2 weeks. And if we're not considering the voter fatigue that is surely to play a part in this conversation, like, Giannis deserves a lot of credit as well. So there are so many options, and I don't think that there's enough of a clear-cut front runner that we should have any definitive opinions, because so much is going to depend on the second half of the season.
Couple comments on this before we get to a question from Fred, and then after Fred, we'll get to yours and Emilio Silva. Thank you both for asking them. Jeremy Brenner points out the Sixers are bad over the 2 weeks. That might help his campaign a little bit. I probably agree. I just don't know how many voters look at the quality of a player's minutes when they're missing that much time versus a LeBron or a Jokic who's going to play so much more often. And the other thing is, if it was only going to be 2 weeks, I might agree. But we also know the Sixers are dog shit without him already. And if he misses a month, like, that probably ends up, and I think it's going to be closer to a month and at least 3 weeks, because he's being reevaluated in 2 weeks. I would think that this is going to end up hurting his case more than anything.
Yeah, if the Sixers could play poorly and still end up in the number 1 seed in the East, I think I would agree more. But because part of his candidacy is going to depend on the Sixers having the best record in the East, if they fall out of that spot, I'm not sure that taking away that is going to be negated by how bad they've looked without that. And in response to another comment in the chat, where the last player to win MVP 3 years in a row was Bird, I think that does end up playing a part in the MVP conversation, the voter fatigue element. It's why we saw LeBron win fewer MVPs during the true prime of his career, as opposed to this extended prime, I guess, than he probably should have. Personally, I don't like to take that into account, because MVP should be a single season award, not like a legacy thing, or not depending on what happened in the past or what might happen in the future. Like, if we're evaluating seasons independently, I think that Giannis is developing more and more of a legitimate case for the 2020-21 season in particular. But yeah, that probably will have an impact in the actual race.
Just before I move on to the RJ Barrett question from Fred, Jeremy Brenner said, this made me laugh, Christian Wood is the real MVP the Rockets haven't won since he went down nearly 6 weeks ago. I mean, that's an actual fact. So, look, Adam, I think this question was for you and only you. Fred asks, is RJ Barrett's recent play simply a good streak or more indicative of significant progress in year 2?
I want to say significant progress. I've been impressed with the turn he's taken recently. We're recording this a day after he had 31 points, a career high 31 points during their Saturday afternoon game. Throughout this season, the quality of shots he's been taking have been significantly better than the ones he took during his rookie season. They just haven't all been falling. And it feels like something has clicked for him lately. Like, not only is he playing smarter offensive basketball, but his teammates have looked more willing to get him the ball. They've shown that they have more confidence in him. We're actually finding the net instead of the side of the rim. Like, I want to buy in. I'm hesitant because I was bought in before the season started. Dan is still making fun of me for having him at number 3 on my most improved player ballot prior to the season starting.
Not anymore. I'm not. I'll let you know that right now.
I appreciate that. That's the first time I'm hearing that, and I love it. I want more of the mea culpas. But yeah, I think maybe I'm a little biased here because I want it to fulfill that preseason prediction, but it feels like this is more of a legit upswing than just some flash in the pan.
Yeah, and look, he's shooting. At some point, we're going to have to accept his three-point shooting is fact. 48.1% since January 15th, which is more than half the season at that point. And the one thing I think that's probably not being talked about enough is his defense has been solid. And I don't know that people also credit that I think he's listed at 6'6". I'm pretty sure I've seen somewhere that he was 6'7", and that's really going to help him cover certain matchups. And Tom Thibodeau hasn't been shy about putting him on, tough assignments. He's not normally covering. That's going to be Bullock a lot of the time, but he's had to get reps against when they were playing the Jazz. He defended Bojan Bogdanovic a bunch. So he defended Kawhi Leonard a little bit, I think, when they were playing the Clippers. And so I think he can be more disruptive as time goes on there. My concerns for him are still this. I don't know. I'd like to see the free throw attempt rate tick up. The percentage is headed in the right direction. But to do that, he probably needs to operate on the ball a little bit more. And his feel out of the pick and roll, it seems off, but I think it's because he's not running them enough, only about 5 per game. And it's working right now. So you don't want to, if it's not broke, don't necessarily fix it. But if the Knicks want him to be, when you look at the Knicks, I think the question is, and I think some Knicks fans do take this as an insult, it's do they have the blue chip cornerstone who can be the best player on a really good team? Julius Randle's a fantastic story. I just long term, I don't know if he's that player. It's RJ Barrett or nothing to me at this point because Mitchell Robinson's really good.
You don't want to put quickly in that conversation?
I don't know if look, he's only a rookie, so maybe his offensive game is tantalizing, the floater, the 3-point shooting, and he's going to be able to hit some stuff off the dribble. So maybe him, but I think RJ Barrett's your best chance at getting there.
I think it's worth a reminder too that RJ Barrett turns 21 in June, in the middle of June. Like he is still a 20-year-old player adjusting to the NBA and coming from a situation at Duke where he played a lot more ISO basketball than he's going to on the Knicks. Like he is still figuring out how to operate in the pick and roll. He's still figuring out how to thrive in these off-ball situations when Julius Randle's handling out of the post. This is a constant learning experience for him, which makes me even more willing to buy into the improvements that we're seeing.
Really quickly, and you don't even have to elaborate, RJ Barrett, is he going to end up having a better career than DeMar DeRozan?
No.
Okay.
No.
I'd speak very highly of DeMar DeRozan because I think RJ Barrett has a chance to be an actually good defender.
I do too, but I think that the body of work for DeRozan at this point, like you can say what you want to about the on-off splits throughout his career, but that guy is a proven scorer. He has consistently made positive changes to his game. Like even if it's not resulting in an inordinate number of wins with the Spurs right now, like he's having the best facilitating season of his career in his 30s. Like he has been an offensive powerhouse for a long time. I think Barrett could have a higher apex than DeRozan has had, but in general, like I'm going to bet on the guy who's had multiple all-star seasons and even more all-star caliber ones.
This question is from Anoyo Silva, and I apologize if I butchered the pronunciation there, but he asks, what do you guys think about Oklahoma City's moves lately? I'm assuming unless I missed one, it's just a trade. They traded Hamidou Diallo for a 2027 second-round pick from Detroit, that's just interesting whenever you get a second-round pick from a perennial, not great team that far in the distance. And then Shvi Mykhailiuk. He's a better shooter than he's shown this year, and he can shoot like he's functional shooting. So I think
he's going to have great functional shooting in EuroLeague.
That was wow. It's almost mean, but I think he's at least someone they could test out. I also thought he was a better defender last season than people were giving him credit for. I think that's a nice flyer if you're intent to keep him. He is only 23 and he's 6'7". That's another guy that I don't think people realize how big he is. And then getting the second round pick is a nice piece of business. Diallo, it was probably smart to move him because he might have gotten like one of those flyer contracts in free agency this summer just because he was running some point for Oklahoma City. People love guys who can really just smash the hell out of the rim. And if you didn't want to give him money, knowing you're probably going to have to max out Shea on an extension this year that will kick in during his 5th season, I totally get it. So a nice piece of business there. I'm interested to see what they do at the deadline. And we talked about this briefly, but Ariza, George Hill, and even Al Horford. Look, if I was a team, I would trade for Al Horford. And my spiciest take is that the Blazers would be better off, a better team, if they traded Yusuf Nurkic and Rodney Hood for Al Horford. There might need to be another salary in there. But
that is pretty spicy. Given how good Nurkic has looked between injuries.
I'm trying, but Al Horford is really good. It's the contract. Look, throw the contract.
Horford has been fantastic lately. Like throwing aside the fact that he is not permitted to play in the second half of back-to-backs. When he's been on the court lately, he's looked way better than anything we could have expected coming off that disaster with the 76ers.
I'm going to stand by it, and I hope Tara Bowen Biggs isn't listening to this, and I hope she doesn't hate me if she is.
You're burning some bridges here.
Our editor at Bleacher Report, BK Knox, my boss at Bleacher Report, was not. Let's say he just wasn't a fan of the take when I broached it with him.
We did have a question from Logan Alton who asked, "What about RJ Barrett or Anthony Edwards?" And Dan, do you want to give my answer for me?
Yeah, I mean, it's RJ Barrett. I don't know. Like, I'm not out on Anthony Edwards just yet. And we had another question, which was, why is Anthony Edwards last in the league in total points added? And is that a bad harbinger for his future? Can we plead he's a rookie? I know you're not high.
Exactly. No. That's what I was going to say. The same thing. Colin Sexton was last in TPA during his rookie season, because that's just what we see when we have inexperienced players who are suddenly tasked with filling monumentally large offensive roles. Ultimately, Anthony Edwards is a 19-year-old who's taking 15.2 shots per game. He doesn't get to the free throw line much. He isn't an advanced passer. He's playing poor defense on one of the worst, if not the worst, defensive teams in basketball. Like, that's just not a recipe for statistical success. I think that if you're watching Anthony Edwards during his rookie season, regardless of whether you were super high on him and thought he should be the number one pick, or like me, thought that he was going to veer further into bust territory, which remains painful as a University of Georgia alum, you want to be watching for what he can do, not what he is doing. Like, ultimately, view whatever is happening this season as necessary speed bumps, as necessary roadblocks that he's going to have to get by at some point, and he's working his way through them right now. You can already see that his feel for the game is improving on both ends of the floor. Like, he's making sharper, quicker rotations on defense. They're not always correct, but he looks more confident. He looks like he knows what the play calls are. He has a better sense for where to be off the ball and when to cut and when to move into space and how to anticipate space. Like, you can very easily watch a couple minutes of Anthony Edwards playing right now, compare it to his first few games in the league, and see noticeable improvement, even if he's still going to be trending down in metrics because of the situation he's in. Like, that is by no means a harbinger of a 100% bust career as a number one pick. I still have questions about his upside, but like, I'm not discouraged by what he's done as a rookie.
I'm going to throw this back at Logan, assuming he's still listening. Would you have Anthony Edwards over RJ Barrett? I know you cover the Timberwolves. That's why I'm asking. And, are you higher on Anthony Edwards? Like, I want to know what the Timberwolves fans' perception is of Anthony Edwards at this point, because I get asked more about Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid at this point than I do about Anthony Edwards. So that's just been something that's interesting. And I mentioned that we had another Anthony Edwards question. I think that was from Andrew Blake was one who asked it. And now we have two Nets questions. This one comes from Q Wavy. Is there a team that can truly compete with Brooklyn and all the talent they have? But Meyer Rothbaum also asked, could the Nets still win the East/title without Kevin Durant? I think Q's one is a good place to start. Do you think that the Nets should be prohibitive title favorites with a healthy Kevin Durant, Adam?
I don't think so. Just because when you're building a one-way team, in the playoffs, one cold spell and you're done. Like, the Nets are not going to win games on the defensive end. That's just a fact at this point. Their offense is so ridiculously potent that they could very easily still win a title in spite of that weakness. But I don't think it's by any means a guarantee, especially during a season where it feels like there are so many teams that are capable of winning that title. I mean, Dan, would you be surprised if the Utah Jazz has what it takes this season? Just one word answers for me.
No.
Yeah, I mean, would you be surprised if Chris Paul finally gets over the hump and wins a title with this Suns team?
This is going to be more than one word answer. I'm angry you didn't start with the Suns, but no, it wouldn't surprise me.
I'm just going down the standings right now. Would you be surprised when Anthony Davis is healthy if he and LeBron James could go back-to-back?
That wouldn't surprise me. They could definitely go back-to-back.
All right, what about if Kawhi Leonard and Paul George just catch fire? Can they carry the Clippers to a title this season?
They can.
You think the Nuggets are good enough to win one?
I do not. I'm
You
just
do
kidding.
not.
They are. I'm just that was a
Okay,
joke.
I was going to follow up on that one, but all right. So now Sixers, they're healthy with Embiid and Ben Simmons. Is it possible?
For sure.
Can Giannis get over the hump this year?
For sure. The real question is, do you think the Bucks or the Sixers or another team in the East are good enough to beat the Nets? Because that's the first roadblock is getting out of the East.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that what we're seeing right now, I think the Bucks might be my pick in the East. Just
they
because they're finally doing,
yeah.
They do. They have the defensive pieces to counter Brooklyn's best offensive scorers, and they're finally doing what we wanted them to do throughout the regular season, which is not just prove that they can win more games than anyone else in the East. It's experimenting. It's trying new rotations. It's trying new ways of getting Giannis the ball and getting other players involved that are eventually going to pan out in the postseason. This feels like a very different team from the ones that have flamed out the last 2 years because they ran into, a Heat team and a Raptors team or a Sixers team. I'm trying to remember who beat them in 2019 and blanking. But yeah, this is not the same team.
Just a note to Christian, we'll be getting to your question after we finish this Nets question up. I'm totally with everything you said. I might like the Sixers better than against the Nets than I do the Bucks because you have Ben Simmons can defend any one of Brooklyn's 3 stars. And then you have Matisse Thybulle, who can probably do the same. Maybe you don't want him going up against James Harden just because he's so strong. You also have Danny Green. So those are 3. And then you have Joel Embiid if he's healthy, just on the back line, messing up floaters and stuff. There's no way to absolutely stop.
Here's my follow-up on that. You said that Ben Simmons can reasonably defend any of Brooklyn's 3 stars, and I agree. Can Giannis?
Will Giannis? Look at how the Bucks defend. They've been switching more, so maybe they would. But Giannis, I feel like he's seen more individual tough reps, but he's best when he's able to just kind of like break up plays from everywhere. I don't know that Brooklyn will give him the opportunity to do that.
Oh, really? So I had the opposite take where I think that kind of defensive ability is more important against Brooklyn because you don't know where the offense is going to come from on any given possession, especially how unselfishly Harden is playing. Like even when he's operating in these ISOs, like we saw the beautiful example of the 2-man game with him and DeAndre Jordan the other night, where he's breaking down defenders with these through the legs dribbles at the top of the key, gets past them, throws it, gets it back, throws an alley-oop. Like I think that with the unselfishness with which the Nets have been playing lately, that I think I would rather have that like free safety element in my defense.
All right, so then here would be my counter. I don't know that Chris Middleton is a good matchup for any of those guys. He is okay defensively. He's not great. Drew Holiday can defend probably. I don't think you want him against Kevin Durant. We've seen him defend Kevin Durant in the past. I don't know if you want him. Brooke Lopez is getting played off the floor in that series this season with the way that he's been moving. And
Agreed.
Joel Embiid, if he's healthy, is not. But this was the second part of that. The Nets question was, can they still win the title of the East if Kevin Durant isn't healthy? Which I don't want to assume that, but this hamstring stuff is, it's getting to the point where it's like, oh, yeah, this is a little concerning. Maybe
I think it plays into the first part of my answer to the first question, which is that yes, they would still be good enough to do so, but you're already working with a smaller margin for error. And if you're now taking Durant out of that equation, it's not like taking Durant out is improving the defense. You're still attempting to overcome that weakness. And I think that it's that much harder to string together good offensive performance after good offensive performance when you're relying on the 2 stars rather than the 3. So I think that, yes, it's still possible, but it is significantly more unlikely. How's that for an obvious answer that I backed my way into for a can the Nets win without Kevin Durant question?
Yeah, that was the biggest edge. The answer is going to be no to me. They need the way that they built their roster. Maybe they make an acquisition where I floated. How much does Orlando like Dinwiddie? Because we know they've been interested in him in the past. And if they want to keep competing after the season, a healthy Dinwiddie is exactly who they need. They don't have cap space, so his bird rights are valuable. You throw Shamet in there with Dinwiddie, all the seconds that you can at this point. I guess you could throw Nick Claxton in there, but Orlando doesn't need him, even though Nick Claxton's interesting. So I would say all the seconds, and you get an Aaron Gordon, then come talk to me. You trade for PJ Tucker and Kevin Durant isn't healthy? Maybe. Without Kevin Durant, I would just say no, because he's actually important to what they want to accomplish defensively. Like, forget, they're going to be fine on offense. You take Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant off the Nets. Hey, guess what? They're still going to be a top 10 offensive team at this point. The defense really does concern me, even when they have the nights where it looks like they're getting stops. And I will say this. We know what James Harden can do in the post. James Harden's one-on-one defense in Brooklyn has not been bad.
It wasn't always bad in Houston.
No, I'm talking about outside the post. James Harden's one-on-one defense has not been bad. I just like that. Maybe I'm not watching enough Nets, but that's where I'm at. Logan sent a great response to when I turned the tables on him. He had Maxey as his highest-rated shooting guard in the draft.
Logan, I love it. I love it. I was there with you.
The Sixers feel good about that take.
Although, let's be real, like Grant Riller was probably my number one.
How's that working out for you?
Still hasn't missed a shot in the NBA.
So Jeremy says to the Harden stuff, James Harden's defense hasn't been bad for 3 years. It's a tired narrative. I'm not going to say I disagree with someone who's going to watch the Rockets more than me. This is that type of podcast. I cover the NBA at a national level. Someone who covers the Rockets is going to see more of James Harden. I think they went to greater lengths to stash him and go after favorable matchups for him. I've seen less of that happen in Brooklyn. There's still a lot of switching, and it feels like he's done the switching a little bit better in Brooklyn too. Maybe also the first whatever games of this season are ingrained into my brain. Logan added on the front of the draft, by the way, that he's been excited to see how much more he improves more on ball when you have D'Lo and Malik Beasley out. And he does say that he's seen flashes of playmaking from him. And look, he's scary when he gets going downhill. It's not always going to end well, but it's going to be exciting. And if he ever gets more composed when he's doing that, and I do think the jumper will be a swing skill for him, though. Can he hit it off the dribble? Can he hit set jumpers? But we'll see. I was higher on him than Adam was, and Adam said a lot of kind things with him earlier in the podcast. So I think that's a win.
On the Harden defensive front, Jeremy, I do ultimately agree with you that he hasn't been bad for a few years now, and it's a tired narrative. I would just definitely be hesitant to cite the steal stats, just because I'm looking at Monte Ellis, who was a 7-time top 10 steals guy.
But again, James Harden has been a very good post defender, and when Houston was switching, it made him more serviceable. So
let's not forget that rebounding is part of defense, and he's really good at that.
And true. And the other thing I'll say, it didn't help that Tillman Fertitta went on First Take or whatever it was. Like, James Harden's one of the best defenders in the NBA, and it was like, all right, we know you need to shill, but no one likes you already, and you had to say that. And I think that causes this incandescent response, and then people harp on it. Are you ready to get to a Hornets question, though, Adam?
Absolutely.
This one comes from Christian Bowen. I hope I'm pronouncing that at least semi-correctly. I'm a huge Hornets fan. I want Bismack Biyombo gone so that they can re-sign him again this summer. That would be my response. But do you think
even after seeing him attempt to isolate on offense recently?
Do you think we could potentially snag Marvin Bagley from the Kings for Bismack and a first-rounder? Yes, and I would caution you against doing so.
Yes, please don't give up a first rounder in that deal. That sounds like a bad idea.
I think the goal should be, and I know he's played really well, if you want to protect the hell out of that first round pick, because you think that the Hornets are going to make the playoffs, and you want to say top 20 for a few years, and then it's 2 second rounders or it has to be top 22 for me. But are you going to pay Malik Monk this summer? And it's not. I think if you had to choose between Malik Monk and Devontae Graham at this point, it's Malik Monk. And I'm a huge Devontae Graham fan, so that hurts. But he can't finish around the basket even when his 3-point shooting has ticked up, and he has like low key injury concerns too. Anyway, I digress. If you don't want to pay Malik Monk because you're still kind of like, yeah, you have LaMelo, but is this like an immediate timeline? Maybe you're worried he's going to be more than mid-level exception money, and once you get into that territory, the books get iffy. I would consider doing Malik Monk and then Bismack Biyombo. I think maybe the Hornets have enough cap space to get it done. But I think Monk and Bismack Biyombo for Marvin Bagley might be more intriguing to me.
I like that idea a lot more.
If you're that high on Malik Monk because you want the proven commodity now, I 100% get it. And I would, if you could get top, I wouldn't. I'm like talking myself out of a top 22 protected first round pick for Marvin Bagley right now.
It's hard to evaluate him, as it is with basically anyone on the Kings at this stage. Logan said in our chat, wait, the Horn Cats are running Biz ISOs. I'm here for that. And I would say that it's more Bismack Biyombo ran a Biz ISO than the Hornets did.
And wasn't this a while ago? I don't know that I saw it.
I think there was. I feel like I saw one the other day.
I have not seen in the past 2 Hornets games I have watched. I have not seen a Bismack Biyombo ISO to my recollection. If
the next evolution of the Hornets is going to be reverse pick and rolls with Bismack Biyombo and LaMelo Ball.
We do have questions about LaMelo Ball, but I want to throw this to, if Christian is still listening, if they're going to go after a Kings big and they're going to give up a first-round pick, Richaun Holmes would be the guy for me. I know he's going to be a free agent, but imagine him running the floor with LaMelo Ball. I have goosebumps just talking about it.
That sounds really fun. I'm in on that one too.
We do have 2 LaMelo Ball questions. I got DM'd this one. We have questions all over the place. I love when people just
I'm still waiting for my first DM'd question.
At Frommel09 on Twitter, guys, go DM him. Patrick asks, how sustainable do you think LaMelo's 3-point percentage is? They're flying in, but the form looks a little uncomfortable. We also had this question from I'll just go with the name, Vaish. Why is Lonzo so bad? It's the Ron Ball brother. So, excuse me. First of all, Lonzo's not bad. I'll cover that one very quickly. Lonzo Ball's been on fire. Not a guy you can count on to half-court create. That is LaMelo, whose 3-point shooting, by the way, I understand the concerns about the form. This is just where I'm at on it. Since he's been inserted into the Hornets starting lineup for good, 49.3% on catch and shoot threes, 40% on off the dribble threes. I don't care how the sausage is being made when it's that damn good. I don't care. And I can't be the super technical guy when it comes to basketball anyway, so maybe you have more thoughts on that.
I'm going to push back on that one when you're done.
I have one more thing to say, is that a lot of them are wide open. And so that's something he's going to have to adjust to. And I think it's more, if he can finish better around the rim, that's going to, defenses aren't going to be able to eventually play him beyond the arc, that they're going to eventually play him when they have deeper scouting reports on him. And so that would be my concern. I do think it's sustainable where, I don't think he's going to hit 40+% of his off the dribble threes. I think we're looking at someone who can shoot 37% off the dribble, 40+% off the catch.
Yeah, I agree that he can get there. In general, he's making 38.7% of his threes so far this season on 5.4 attempts per game, which is really impressive. His free throw percentage seems to back up the idea that he is a good shooter as well. And I think what I would take away from this rookie season is that the baseline for his shooting ability is better than I would have thought coming in. But I'm not going to bet on him repeating that and not going through some prolonged cold spell until his form is more replicable. Because ultimately, yes, it's going in. It looks pretty uncomfortable for him. It looks very uncomfortable for viewers. And we've seen unorthodox shooting forms succeed in the past. I'm thinking Sean Marion with his catapult release. I'm thinking Kevin Martin with his quick short arm delivery. But all of those were consistent and the same mechanics were repeated time and again, which is what matters more than anything else. So with LaMelo Ball, where he's kind of twisting his feet in some willy-nilly fashion and it's not consistent, that's what concerns me. It's still working, but when you don't know which way he's going to twist the lower half of his body or how much it's going to rotate, that's when it gets hard to bet on it being sustainable. But I think that he's shown enough this season and has proved that he has the touch necessary to become a consistent shooter just with that offseason of work. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, we saw Lonzo Ball retool his jumper in the past, and he's shot better this year. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see something similar happen with LaMelo, where he comes back for the 2021-22 season with a revamped jumper, and it immediately works because he does have the touch. He just needs to be coached up.
So you think there needs to be a change, basically?
Yeah, I do. But I think that he's proven to me that the baseline for his shooting is high enough that he's not gonna risk just messing everything up by tinkering with it, because he's making it work with atrocious shooting form.
I'm going to go one last question here that we already have. If anyone who remains in the room, I know a lot of people just left, and wants to get a question in, now would be the time, because we are going to wrap up. And I'll cover this one actually quickly. It'll be 2. Do my beloved Nuggets need to make any trades? And if so, who would they target? This is from Of the Painter. Of the Painter, I'll just refer you to the beginning of this podcast. I suggested Will Barton, PJ Dozier, and a second round pick, maybe this year's first round pick if Orlando demands it, for Aaron Gordon. The final question we have banked that I'll get to, because we have a ton more banked actually. 2023 Hornets NBA champions asks, who's the most electric team in the NBA and why is it the Hornets? I now challenge you to pick a non-Hornets team.
Yeah, I mean, I would go with the 2023 Charlotte Hornets.
Oh, the 2023 Charlotte Hornets.
Absolutely. With that retooled jumper.
Do you have an actual other pick?
It should have been the Hawks. It's not the Hawks. It should have been. I think the Hornets are a great pick just because LaMelo Ball has suddenly transformed like a franchise that no one really wanted to watch into must-see television most nights. But, I mean, is it bad if I pick the Nets right now just because what they're doing on offense is so scintillating?
No, I don't think it is.
Is that a cop-out answer? Like, can I say that?
No, I think you can. And I don't know if this is electric. I am endlessly fascinated by watching the Phoenix Suns. Just the poise with which Chris Paul and Devin Booker operate, forcing teams to play at their own pace, their recent loss notwithstanding. Mikal Bridges is a defensive monster. He is on my all-NBA, all-defense team this year. It is happening. That dude is going to get paid in his extension. Jay Crowder is just a force of nature. Dario Saric has been, we mentioned this already too, annihilating people this year. They're a fun team, and I think they're a serious team. They're second in the West, and I do feel like people still look at it as, oh, this is quaint, this is cool. It's real. And I think they're probably going to peak as they get closer to the postseason. The one question I would have, though, is there something to all these guys don't have playoff experience aside from CP3, really? You know, Ayton, Booker, Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson, who's been defending. He's been defending better than he's shooting this year, which is just wild to me. I think it helps to have CP3, Jay Crowder. Saric has probably been to the playoffs for a minute. I don't know if he made the playoffs, and he definitely didn't make them in Minnesota. We can know that.
He's played in them before, I want to say.
So, but he's not like rich with experience there. That's where you're going to lean on Crowder. That's where Tucker might help you if you trade for a Tucker. So that's the team. The Nets, I think, are the ones that I'm gravitated towards, and they're not even at full strength yet, though. And it's probably too popular of a pick. And Phoenix might be too popular at this point because they're second in the West. But I still feel like they're being slept on somehow.
I feel like Utah is a fun pick too, just because that Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell offensive combination has been so electric to watch. And I really enjoy watching Gobert play defense. Like, it's a different kind of exciting, but just watching a true master at the craft.
We have our final question from Logan. Going back to trade ideas, if you had to bet on a top 50 player being traded at the deadline, who would it be? And what does that trade look like?
Wow.
So I think we're going to assume that Victor Oladipo is no longer considered a top 50 player.
I don't know that I have any that really come to mind. Like, Oladipo's outside that. Aaron Gordon's outside that. Bradley Beal and Zach LaVine aren't going to get moved. Kyle Lowry?
He would be the most likely one. I just don't see a viable trade partner aside from Philly.
Yeah, that's the only thing that makes sense. If I had to bet on it, that's probably my pick is betting on Lowry going to Philly for draft picks and matching cap, and Toronto selling really low.
Yeah, and I think it's Maxey, a pick, Danny Green, and then other salary to make it work. So I'll throw this out there though, just to get off the beaten path on a name. To Lonzo Ball, because he's going to be in restricted free agency.
Lonzo Ball isn't a top 50 player.
He's been close over
No, I strongly disagree with that. I'd have him more in that like 90 to 100 range still.
Has Rashawn Holmes been a top 50 player this year?
Closer.
DeMar DeRozan?
Yeah. But is he going to get moved?
I don't think he will. I'm just the top 50 player with the best chance of getting moved. You think outside the box here, Adam.
Logan says John Collins, which is another interesting answer. I don't know that he's been in that top 50 this year based on track record probably. I'm still not convinced Atlanta actually trades him, especially because it's 4-0 since Nate McMillan took over.
I will say he's not top 50, but a fascinating name that I would at least look at if I'm this team, based off talking with people who cover the Suns. If they don't seem to have as much faith in DeAndre Ayton as it seems, now's the time to move him. I know his value isn't super high, but he still kind of has like the sheen of the number one pick who people think is really good on defense, because I do think he can be better. If you had to pick the biggest name, though, let's throw the top 50 out. Who has the best chance of being traded?
I think it's still Lowry.
Yeah, I think I'm with you.
And I hate saying that just because it's frustrating anytime the best player in franchise history gets traded, which is what he is.
He is. But what's tough with John Collins, and I'm throwing Lonzo in there because he's been really good, is how do you value having someone's bird rights in restricted free agency? Because what you're doing is paying for the right to pay them. And that's weird.
I still push back on the idea that John Collins is going to get moved just because Atlanta knows that it bet on this core to some extent, at least. It has performed better since McMillan took over. The talent is there. They're in a playoff position right now.
As they got healthier? Shocker.
Right. So I think that there's still enough realistic faith in what was done over the offseason to avoid having to make that decision now.
Adam, how about you do the close since I hijacked your opening without even realizing what was happening?
It's still all yours. I enjoy sitting back and listening to who the shout-out's going to be for.
Thank you for everyone who joined us and for the people, Jeremy and Logan. I think you were with us the entire hour plus here. This was fun. We'll probably do another one of these exact types of trade idea things before the deadline next week. Please, if you have not already, remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Hardwood Knocks wherever you're getting your podcasts. Until next time, we leave you with the shout-out to the one, the only. He is a top 50 player in this season, Lonzo Ball.